Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. Yeah, we're selling ice cream around here this week. It's going to be tasty. If you get it delivered, you save $15.70. I've got the box up here and the DJ music of the summertime. I'm going to go out and hang out on the Taharka truck next summer. They're actually, Luke, they're going to name a flavor after us. If we sell 250 of these, I think we're already up to about 50 here going into week number 2. So we're trying to sell some ice cream, $15.70. Use the Baltimore Positive code at Taharka Brothers. Luke, the game's over now. Finally, it feels like we let up, and they're not going to play until Tuesday. I mean, it's already the next week. I had to, put some turkey pot pie together on Wednesday night to get rid of the turkey. So we're now into December. The Christmas lights are up and all that. And here come the Dallas Cowboys, right? And certainly the quarterback we know well. I don't know what to say about the aftermath of all of this other than it's sort of dogs and cats when they're playing on Wednesdays and Tuesdays and Mondays. I mean, they're not going to play for a Sunday till Christmas week.
Yeah, I was just saying to you, it feels like it's a Monday morning or a Tuesday. I mean, it's odd. We're now at the point where the Ravens would have been originally playing the Cowboys. And now, I mean, it's just what a time to be alive, right? But I think for the Ravens, we've talked about this. I've written about this at BaltimorePositive.com, just this notion of getting through what the last week and a half was from the virus standpoint, and certainly eventually playing the football game, whether it should have been played or not on Wednesday. You and I have talked a lot about that, and very strong opinions and reasons for those opinions. But now if you're the Ravens, hoping, knock on wood, fingers crossed, saying a prayer, whatever, that you truly are past this outbreak. And that's not to say you won't have any COVID issues at all the rest of the year, but you hope it's much more in the isolated case kind of scenario, Marlon Humphrey or Brandon Williams being a close contact before the Philadelphia game. And you can kind of get back to the focus being on football. As you pointed out, there is the challenge of being on this weird schedule these next couple weeks. Not that they're on a Thursday kind of short week, like you'd normally think about a Thursday game under normal circumstances, but you play a game Wednesday afternoon, you get back Wednesday night, you turn around and you're playing a game on Tuesday. And, oh, by the way, a Dallas Cowboys team that hasn't played since Thanksgiving. So there's that. But you do look at the Cowboys, the 3-8. Their offensive line has just been absolutely crushed. I mean, they lost Zach Martin in the Thanksgiving game. He's supposed to be out for a couple weeks. They lost a starting offensive lineman. They had already lost linemen. So their offensive line might be more decimated than the Ravens at this point. Virus outbreak aside, and assuming McCary and Skura get back in the coming days. But they lost their quarterback. And to your point, Andy Dalton, Ravens are very familiar with him. And people will, anyone who's looking at it from a more pessimistic viewpoint will point to Andy Dalton, Tyler Boyd, and think of those painful memories. But for the Ravens, it really is trying to stabilize things, get back to not full-blown normalcy, because there is none of that in 2020, but getting closer to that in the 2020 season context, and putting the focus back on football. That you can put the focus back on football, and get your guys back and work on some of the things that they need to work on. As we've said, I'm not sure there's a whole lot you can really take away from the game. Understanding how undermanned they were, but you move past that now and you get ready for this football game, and against a team that's 3-8 and against the final 5 opponents that have a .336 winning percentage. It's sitting right there. And look, I'm not going to sit here and paint the rosiest picture from the standpoint of, they've got some work to do. And they're going to have to count on some other teams losing some games here. But when you do look at those other teams and you look at their schedules, I don't think the Cleveland Browns are going 12-4. I'm putting that out there now. I know that's a really bold statement.
Well, if they are, they're beating the Ravens, right? Along the way.
And that's the thing, right? So you look at them. We already talked about this earlier in the week. I mean, Las Vegas, the Raiders, just a terrible loss. I mean, they just listless, absolutely no life whatsoever in going to Atlanta and getting their butts kicked. I mean, that was an embarrassing performance from a team that, is in the hunt and is, the only team this year that's beaten Kansas City. So you kind of look at those teams. You look at Miami with Tua versus Fitzpatrick. I mean, I give the Dolphins a lot of credit for what they've done this year, but do I think they're better than the Ravens? No, I don't. But when you look at the records and you see how the final 5 weeks are going to play out, those teams are going to be able to determine that. But my point is the teams that are ahead of the Ravens right now in the wild card race are not teams that I expect to run the table. I think you're going to see them have some missteps. And the Ravens, you look at their final 5 games, anything less than 4-1, they don't deserve to be in the playoffs because that means they're losing to not just a losing team, but these are teams that are well below 500. We're not talking about 5-6. We're talking 3-8. We're talking Jacksonville at 1-10. We're talking the Giants at 4-7. Although I'll give the Giants credit, they played a little bit better over the last few weeks. So, but still, it's NFC East better. So and then you have the Bengals at the end of the year. So, I mean, anything short of 4-1 for this team over the final 5 weeks, they don't deserve to be in the playoffs because that means they've lost to a team that is absolutely, unequivocally inferior. Now, the Cleveland game, that's the one game you look to and say, yeah, you're going to have to go out there and play good football. But guess what? If they go out there and play the best version of football that this team is capable of playing, and I don't think it's 2019 level. I think, we have to let that go. And I said that several weeks ago. But still, the best football we've seen this team play this year, they beat the Cleveland Browns then. They beat them in week 1. They blew them out in week 1, even if Cleveland's a little bit better than they were then. So it's all sitting right there for them. But this goes back to the questions. Where are you from a health standpoint? Guys coming back from the virus, not even suggesting some of the more extreme worst case scenarios, but just understanding that anyone who's had a respiratory illness, anyone who's had pneumonia, for example, or bronchitis, for example, you can be, quote, recovered from it and back at work and no longer contagious, but that doesn't mean you're at your 100% best version of yourself physically. So that is something that when you have so many players that have experienced this virus and tested positive as part of this outbreak, you do wonder, are you going to have some guys coming back that they're only 85 or 90%? Well, that's a big deal in the NFL. So not to say that to be an alarmist, it's being a realist and acknowledging the situation, even from a football standpoint, beyond acknowledging the, just the overall well-being. So, there are questions, and you certainly look at this offense, even before the last 10 days and wondering if it's going to be good enough. The defense, I liked what I saw on Wednesday, considering how much we were talking about the fact that they kind of folded against Tennessee late. They couldn't tackle, they couldn't cover. I mean, they just completely fell apart. So for them to play the way they did against the Pittsburgh offense that, you mentioned the point in an earlier segment, they dropped 5 passes. I mean, that was there were some things that Pittsburgh could have done. They had self-inflicted mistakes, but still, this was a Ravens defense that was undermanned, especially up front, and they played a good football game. They certainly played well enough to win. Problem was you didn't have a representative NFL caliber offense out there, or maybe you did, but it looked like the Jets, let's say. So that's the question with Lamar coming back and so many other individuals on the offensive side of the ball, and eventually getting Andrews back after, presumably after the Cowboys game. You got to figure out a way to be better on offense, and doesn't have to look like it did last year, but it's got to look better than it has really over the last 2 months or so. From the Cleveland and Houston game on, it's been very, very choppy offensively. So that's not so much for these last 5 games.
I don't know that that's going to get fixed, dude. I mean, you know what I mean? Like in the way that we remember it looking last year.
Well,
I mean,
and
whenever this thing comes back together, it's still a shell of what it was in week 2.
Well, and that's where there's somewhere in between, right? It's needing to be better than it's been, but also acknowledging, you're not going to be the record-setting group that you were a year ago. And I said from the beginning.
But you might look that way against crappy teams.
Well, but that's where you want to build some momentum. You do want to see sharper football. We saw another illegal formation, which, look, I as much as we've beaten them up for those, I wasn't outraged about that on Wednesday. You're going to have some of that with guys.
I wasn't
lining up.
outraged about anything on Wednesday, and I think you and I have been sort of tough on them and saying they've been ducking these questions. At some point, they really do owe the fans some sort of an explanation about how this happened, because it just didn't happen the way Harbaugh.
Right.
Well, it just happened. No, it just didn't happen, dude.
Sure.
You got billions of dollars on the line so that this didn't happen. So when you move schedules around 4 times on the fan base, I don't need you to point a gun at Steve Saunders, but you really should explain to your fans, explain to the world how this happened, and that even your billion-dollar organization and your really smart people had this happen. Maybe there is something good to come from a local bank or a local business or a local office to say, hey, be vigilant. It cost us. It cost us the biggest game of the year. It cost us a chance to prepare. We lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and maybe 5 weeks from now they won't make the playoffs because of that.
Yeah, it's possible. It's certainly possible. But going back to where they go from here, from a football standpoint, it's still sitting right there for them. It is, and I know some people that tend to be a little more pessimistic and don't like losing the Steelers under any circumstances. And I get that. It's the Steelers. It's Ravens Steelers. You never want to lose. I totally get that. But also being realistic to see who they were playing with. Realistic from the standpoint of I didn't really love their chances and wasn't going to pick them even before the outbreak occurred, just being on a short week and seeing what we had seen about the offense. But if you get your guys back, get back into a little more of a normal routine. The next couple of weeks, it'll be challenging because you're playing on a Tuesday and then you're playing on a Monday. But at the very least, it's 6 days to prepare still. It's not as though you're playing a Sunday game and then playing Thursday. It's not that really quick turnaround. So just find your legs a little bit. Find your sea legs a little bit, so to speak, and iron out some of the issues that they've had and be better on offense. Doesn't mean you're going to be the best. Be better on offense. And on defense, it really, for me, it comes down to I don't have any major concerns about the defense other than just got to get Brandon Williams and Calais Campbell back. And, I'm not saying that that's a given that they're going to come back and be 100% right, but you have every assumption at this point they're going to come back and they're going to be able to play. And it's not as though the calf or the ankle injury for either of them was season ending, but it came at a rough time, not having them against Tennessee, not having them against Pittsburgh, even if the Ravens had been, full go from a virus standpoint anyway. But you are going to need those guys back, especially, you might be able to beat the Cowboys and be okay against them at the very least, but you certainly want to have those guys back against Cleveland. And if you're going to be talking about wanting to make any noise in January, which, look, do I think would I go back on my Super Bowl pick now, picking them? Yeah, I would now with everything that's happened, but they can still get in the playoffs. I think they can still win a playoff game, which as much as that seems like lowering the bar from last year, considering where they were, it would still be a step if they can win a playoff game.
By the way, dude, I don't know if they get healthy.
They are right now.
I'm not the most optimistic guy, but you start talking about playoff games and stuff, they still walk on the field with most teams in this conference. Sure, I don't know where the Bills are or where the Chiefs will be at that point. COVID hasn't come to town in some of those places as well.
Right.
So the landscape changes dramatically from Joe Flacco planking to whatever it could become a month later. But without Ronnie Stanley, without Nick, I'm looking at this much more realistically and holistically as saying, what will they be? They'll probably be pretty pedestrian by the time they get there. Now, they're pretty pedestrian on Wednesday, almost beat an undefeated team. So I am very, very much of that. Get in the tournament and go play the game. And, your chances of winning it are the same as winning an ACC tournament back in the day. You shock the world, you show up one day, and there are no fans. There could be a flu bug in the Buffalo locker room, and they're going to make them play. That's what we've learned, right? So there's all of that going on. I'm not writing the Ravens off in that way, but I don't think they're very good as comprised. But I don't know how good everybody else is either.
Sure. And for me, and you just kind of said it, can that happen once where they go – and again, home field advantage is –
0.
It's irrelevant right now. I mean, okay, there's something to traveling, but beyond that, and the elements, considering
Well, the Ravens are
depending
much
on your
more
style
equipped
of
to win a
play.
game that's really lousy weather because
Sure,
they run the ball.
sure. Right. So my point is, and you were saying this as well, in talking about one game going up against anyone, I give them a chance against anyone other than Kansas City at this point, because they have to prove that. I mean, Kansas City has their number, and until the Ravens beat them once, I don't know how you can, with any objectivity other than, with any thought other than you love the Ravens and you wear purple colored glasses, pick them over
Dude, if
Kansas City
Travis
until they do it.
Kelce has an
But
ankle injury that week and can't
well,
play,
I mean,
that really
sure. I mean,
but it really is
injuries,
about one
but
player,
injuries are all.
you know.
I know, but injuries, we can say that about any team. But if we're talking about reasonable circumstances, that's the one team you look to and say they can't beat them. But Pittsburgh, who they outplayed in the first game, Lamar turns it over 4 times, and in the second game, they lost by 1 score, and they were missing, 15 guys of note. You look at that scenario, they can beat anyone in the AFC on any given day. But with the injuries they've had, some of their deficiencies, do you see that happening 3 weeks in a row against 3 different opponents to get to the Super Bowl? And that's where you kind of look at it and say, I don't think it's in the cards for them. But you know what? I would have said the same thing about the 2012 team. So you never really know. It's not to say that they're going to do it, but it's to say that it's not impossible. But they have to get guys back. They have to find a higher level of consistency on offense. The defense, they need to get healthier up front. We know they have very good special teams. That's not in question whatsoever. So, you kind of look at all those factors. I still think I'm still picking this team to make the playoffs, for example, considering where they are right now, even though if it started today, they'd be out. I think they are going to make a run to get in, and then we'll see where they are at that point. To your point, who knows what's going to happen from injury standpoint, outbreak standpoint? I mean, you just don't know. I mean, it's what's so crazy about this year. So, it's funny. Wednesday will be remembered in Raven Steelers lore, not for good reasons, but we'll remember that game for a long, long time. But time will tell whether, the fact that they put up a little bit of a fight and they didn't lay down and they didn't have veterans that went into business for themselves and mailed it in. They played hard. We'll see if that was a sign of this team being able to get off the mat and compete and win games and get in the tournament here over the next 5 weeks.
He is Luke Jones. You can find him, Baltimore Luke, out on the Twitter thing and on Facebook and on social media. And not in Owings Mills because he's washing his hands and wearing his mask up there in Shrewsbury. I'm in downtown Baltimore. We're selling some ice cream all around the region. You just one click away at Arca Brothers. You get $15.70 off ordering your ice cream this month using the code Baltimore Positive. Let my wife tell you about it during the break. We let her do a commercial this month. It's fun. She's getting used to it now. She's in here working hard. She's she's going to be reading 5 commercials next month to break it up from my crazy voice around here. Our friends at the Royal Farms are here, and Justin Tucker breaks that up with the commercials around here and the coffee specials as well. And our friends at Sporticulture, we have so many great gifts. Fadley's is shipping crab cakes. Our dear friends at Costas are shipping crab cakes. Ship from both of them. Don't ask me which one. Ship both. And, spread a little local love here. We're a local-based company. All of our sponsors are local. Nothing more local. It says right here on the side of the box, Lift Up Baltimore. I like that. Lift Up Baltimore. 8 pints of ice cream, eggnog, peppermint bark, sweet potato casserole, all that stuff. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking ice cream and Baltimore sports.